This is a CBC News special presentation.
Behind the pageantry, the ceremony, the work of the last 10 days, a very personal loss.
We owe her the most heartfelt debt.
But one family's grief, the loss of a mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, is shared by the people she served from the United Kingdom to Canada and beyond.
She's lived with us all our lives.
She's got like a magic about her.
Queen Elizabeth II dedicated her life to service. Now she is honored in death. By the hundreds of thousands, her people lined the streets to say thank you. Personal, poignant send-offs.
I didn't expect to be as emotional as I was when seeing the coffin.
As you approach, your heart starts pounding and the emotion is there.
I can't express my feeling.
Steady and sound over 7 decades, the Queen was a source of comfort in hard times for many. Quite simply, the only monarch many of us had ever known.
That opportunity to stand here and show her that we love her just as much as she loved this country.
We love her, and it's been like losing a family member.
You know, she's regal throughout her life, regal in her death.
So today, people around the world will be watching the heart of London and a goodbye that's been a week and a lifetime in the making. Good morning, Canada. You're up early, and rightly so. This is history, and this is London. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Thank you for joining us for special coverage of the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. That is, of course, Buckingham Palace behind us, and we are sitting right next to a little bit of home. Canada Gate is just to my left. This whole area has become a place of public mourning, as has Westminster Hall, where all weekend the Queen lay in state. People who had lined up for 10, 15, 20 hours were able to say their own quiet goodbyes to their Queen. Now, today that shifts to the final journey, the most formal, the most meticulously choreographed moments of this 10-day mourning period. Every moment that is visible to a camera will be carried live around the world. That certainly did not happen when the Queen's father died in 1952, the last time the world saw the funeral of a British sovereign. We are all about to experience really layers and layers of history here. And the end of this day will mark the end of the national mourning period, one that has been full of flowers and stories and crowds and togetherness and stillness as people thank the only Queen they have ever known or perhaps ever will know for her lifetime of service. So we do know that plans for this day have been set for years, for decades really, and that what we're about to see, all of it, is exactly as Queen Elizabeth wanted it to be. We have an entire team with us today as we take in what's about to unfold. So including Dan Snow, historian, broadcaster, the host of the very popular podcast, Dan Snow's History Hit. It is the #1 history podcast in this country. And Anne McMillan, the former CBC London bureau chief who spent decades in the UK covering the Queen, and author. They both know this royal family very well, and making this extra special, of course, not only are you very smart people, you're also a family. This is a mother and son team, Dan.
I'm very proud to be working with my mum. And I've lost the Canadian accent, but I kept the passport. It's the important thing. It's an honour to be here with the CBC. And my mum, I hope she doesn't call me up on too much, call me out on too many mistakes.
And I'm waiting for you to correct him already. And we will we'll be walking through the plan for the day in just a moment. But as we watch you there, you joined us for the lying in state, and I'm so appreciative of that.
This is a CTV News special presentation.
A story of a queen who wrote bright pages in the story of the year.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service.
She went to heaven. We love you. And we miss you. Now she's with Prince Philip, and he's not lonely.
Been one of the great royal romances of history.
My mother's reign was unequal in its duration, its dedication, and its devotion. So, Your Majesty, that is why we all say thank you.
It is just after 9 a.m. here in London, and the final preparations are underway for what will be an emotional day of reflection and mourning for Her Majesty, carried out with amazing precision and an incredible attention to detail. Good morning, everyone. I'm Omar Sachedina, and thank you so much for joining us. Over the next 8 hours, we will bring you the state funeral here in London and the committal service in Windsor for Queen Elizabeth II. This is a moment in time where people across the UK, the Commonwealth, and the world will pay tribute to a woman who has led an inspiring life of service and share the sadness that it has come to an end. Now, just to give you some perspective, Her Majesty's coffin is still inside Westminster Hall, where she had been lying in state for the past 5 days. That ended about 2.5 hours ago. About 15 minutes before her state funeral is due to start, at 11 a.m. here in London, 6 a.m. Eastern, there will be a procession that starts from Westminster Hall and ends here at Westminster Abbey. Then, after the state funeral, Her Majesty's coffin will be taken by gun carriage to Wellington Arch, then transferred to a hearse for the final journey to Windsor Castle. That's about 40 kilometers west of London. And we will have deployed our correspondents all along that procession route throughout central London, from Westminster Palace to Wellington Arch, Hyde Park, and Trafalgar Square, just outside Canada House. But let's begin right now with CTV's chief international correspondent, Paul Workman, who is outside Westminster Palace and Westminster Hall, the oldest part of that palace. Paul, certainly Elizabeth didn't expect to be queen, but destiny led her into that role. And now, as we reflect on her life today, it's difficult to imagine it any other way.
Absolutely so, and that's why we're seeing this extraordinary outpouring of affection and this pageantry today that is just going to capture everybody who is watching either on television or on the street. Last-minute preparations going on here, last-minute security checks where I am. In about an hour and a half, the Queen's coffin will emerge from Westminster Hall, as you were saying.
It is Monday, September 19th, and it is the end of the modern Elizabethan age. This is London's Westminster Abbey, where invited guests began to gather 2 hours ago. The world is about to say a final farewell to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. For more than a week now, a pilgrimage has been underway here in London. Hundreds of presidents, prime ministers, kings and queens are now here in the city, along with hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world crowded into the streets. No other person alive today could command an outpouring of love and respect like this. Hello and welcome to London on this historic day, the state funeral of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I'm Donna Friesen. We are overlooking Westminster Abbey, where the service will take place. In less than an hour from now, the procession to the Abbey will begin. The Queen's coffin moving, being pulled from Westminster Hall, where she has been lying in state, to the Abbey. And at precisely 11 a.m. local time, the funeral will begin. Her son, King Charles, last night thanked the countless people who he said have been such a support for him and his family. And we will bring you every moment of this day. It will be a long one, especially for the family. Farah Nasser is in London's Hyde Park. That's about 30 minutes walk west of here. Thousands of people gathered there to watch the funeral on big screens. Crystal Gamansing is outside Windsor Castle today. That's where the Queen's coffin will arrive about 5 hours from now for another service, a committal service, and then a private burial next to her husband, the former Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. Jeff Semple is in Trafalgar Square, just north of the Abbey here, another gathering place for people. Let's go to Crystal in Windsor first. Crystal, take us through the events of the day.
Donna, as you mentioned, 11 a.m. sharp is when the service at Westminster Abbey will begin. In addition to all of those dignitaries, hundreds of individuals who have had special honors from the Queen will also be included in that service. It'll take about an hour's time, and then we will see the procession once again moving from Westminster Abbey towards the Wellington Arch. So the funeral beginning at 6 a.m. Eastern, wrapping up by about 12 p.m., and then that procession to Wellington Arch begins. When it gets to the arch around Hyde Park, that is where Her Majesty's coffin will be transferred to the state hearse, and the procession towards Windsor will begin. When it arrives at Windsor Castle, it will make the beautiful long drive up the long walk and into Windsor Castle. That is where members of the royal family will greet the hearse. They will be waiting for her in the quadrangle, and then we will see a procession inside Windsor Castle as the family makes their way to St. George's Chapel. St. George's Chapel has played a huge role in many moments of the royal family's life, from weddings we've seen there, but also most recently Prince Philip's funeral was held there. That service taking place at 4:00 p.m. local time, 9 a.m. Eastern time. The committal service will be about an hour in length, and it will be televised. It will include the moment where we see those royal instruments removed from her coffin, the orb, the scepter, the imperial state crown. It'll be placed on the altar, and then at the end of that service, that is when we will see the coffin lowered into the royal vault. All of this will be televised. There will be a private burial for members of the royal family. This is an incredibly hard day for members of the royal family, so they will have a little time privately just by themselves to say their final farewells. That part will not be televised, but the funeral service here, the committal service, starting at 4:00 local time. Donna.
All right, Crystal Gamansing in Windsor. We will be taking you to Windsor a little later in the day and have Crystal with us throughout the service, or the lead up to the service. When the funeral actually starts, I should say, we intend to be silent so that all of you can listen and bear witness and be part of it.
Broadcasting from the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee peoples, and since 1805, the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, this is City News.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
She was the only monarch most of us had ever known. Ascending to the throne at 25, Queen Elizabeth II inherited the daunting job guiding the Commonwealth through an ever-changing world. She witnessed the horrors of World War II, the UK's entrance and exit from the European Union, major scientific breakthroughs, a global pandemic.
We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
Not to mention her private life in the public eye, her father's sudden death, the tragedy of Diana, the tarnished reputation of Andrew, the royal rift stirred up by Harry and Meghan, and the passing of her beloved Philip. Through the triumphs, trials, and tribulations, the Queen remained a steady force, a constant, a lifetime dedicated to the Commonwealth. 15 UK Prime Ministers, 12 Canadian Prime Ministers, 56 nations and territories. 2.5 billion people were under her reign. Her Majesty, after all, remains the longest-serving British monarch ever. 70 years on the throne that led to a Platinum Jubilee in June. And as the crown is passed to King Charles III, 10 days of mourning culminate today as the world pauses to bid farewell to Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. Beautiful pictures of Her Majesty. It is an overcast day here in central London. The clouds reflect the somber mood of this day we all knew would come, the state funeral for Queen Elizabeth II. Good morning and welcome to our special coverage of a woman who was a constant for the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and really the world. As Canadians, whether we knew it or not, Her Majesty was always there, on our money, on our stamps, in our lives. Today, after more than a week of public grieving, we say goodbye. We will say goodbye today with a very special broadcast. As I say, I'm thrilled to have with me a royal historian. Helen Carr joins me. Also, beside Helen is Daniel Richler, some of our Canadian royalty, broadcaster and writer. Beside me is John Fraser, author of Secrets of the Crown. And we're thrilled to have former BBC royal correspondent Jenny Bond with us also. 30 years of covering this, Jenny. I'm actually going to start with you. You've covered this family so long. Your view on what we've seen unfold just to this point today?
Well, it's a mixture of emotions, I think, in the UK. It's a moment of unity, unusual harmony in the UK. In death, she seems to have brought us that, however temporary that will be. And a feeling, walking amongst the crowds this morning, as I was at 4:15 in the morning, of quiet contemplation and great gratitude.
And Helen, we're seeing the inside as the dignitaries arrive in Westminster Abbey, such hallowed halls of marriages and queens, kings, births, deaths.
It's this 1,000-year-old edifice, and if you can see some of the tombs that are in there, so steeped in symbolism, which is something that you see so much within these sorts of royal events. They're so filled with history, and you know, Westminster Abbey itself, it predates William the Conqueror. It predates 1066. The first king, Edward the Confessor, being the first to actually be buried there. So this is quite an extraordinary thing to be witnessing.
And John, as you watch the dignitaries arriving, we've actually been seeing this for quite a while now this morning with 2,000 people in the Abbey making their way in there. Your thoughts on this?
Bonjour mesdames, messieurs, ici Céline Galipeau. Nous poursuivons notre émission spéciale sur ses adieux à la Reine Élisabeth II en Grande-Bretagne et dans le Commonwealth. Ce matin, les funérailles de la Reine ont eu lieu à l'abbaye de Westminster, une cérémonie grandiose en présence de plus de 2000 invités. Le cortège a ensuite traversé le centre de Londres une dernière fois. Et vous allez voir les images du convoi funéraire. Dans environ une demi-heure, la dépouille de la reine devrait arriver au château de Windsor. C'est la plus vieille des résidences royales. Il y aura ensuite une procession à pied, encore une fois, jusqu'à la chapelle Saint-Georges pour un service religieux. Et le corps d'Élisabeth II sera ensuite déposé en privé, dans la stricte intimité, dans la chapelle du roi George VI, aux côtés de son mari, le prince Philippe, de son père, le roi George VI, et de la reine-mère, ainsi que sa sœur, Margaret. Alors, nous poursuivons avec nos invités, Estelle Boutier, analyste de la monarchie. Rebonjour Estelle.
Bonjour.
Marc Laurando, journaliste, spécialiste de la monarchie. Rebonjour Marc. Et le révérend Bertrand Olivier, recteur de la cathédrale anglicane Christ Church à Montréal.
Bonjour.
Rebonjour. Alors, c'est vraiment la dernière étape qui s'amorce, Marc.
Oui, bien là, c'est une cérémonie dans un lieu qu'elle affectionne, le château de Windsor, qu'elle a, vous vous en rappelez peut-être, réparé à ses frais, parce que quand est arrivé le fameux incendie,
oui.
Elle s'est rendue compte qu'elle ne pouvait pas demander à l'État d'assumer tout ça. Elle a pris 2 décisions. Celle de elle-même puiser dans sa cassette pour restaurer le château et commencer à payer de l'impôt aussi. Il y a cet aspect exemplaire qui est survenu durant l'année horrible qu'elle a vécue. Et puis, c'est le lieu familial, c'était dit tout à l'heure, c'est là où elle était un peu plus à la campagne. Ça combinait la ville et la campagne, tandis que Buckingham Palace, c'est le bureau, là. C'est comme être constamment à son bureau. Elle n'aimait pas ça. Tandis que Windsor, en plus d'être un lieu plus agréable pour elle, c'est un lieu historique familial, puisque George VI y est enterré, le prince Philippe, on s'en souvient, a eu ses funérailles là.
Il y a des mariages aussi qui ont été célébrés là.
Oui,
Harry et Meghan se sont mariés
Harry
à
et Meghan,
Windsor.
et même Charles et Camilla se sont mariés là aussi.
C'est une cérémonie plus discrète.
Oui, c'était, d'un point de vue religieux, leur mariage était béni, mais c'était pas tout à fait un mariage anglican. Enfin, c'était pas à l'intérieur de l'Église.
Non, c'est-à-dire que normalement, le clergé en Angleterre peut officier en tant que célébrant de mariage.
Bon matin tout le monde. Sophie Thibault avec toute l'équipe avec vous pour les prochaines heures sur TVA et LCN pour une émission spéciale sur les funérailles de la Reine Élisabeth II dont le décès il y a 11 jours a plongé le Royaume-Uni dans un deuil profond. Il est 5h30 notre heure, 10h30 heure de Londres. Un moment historique, hein, c'est vraiment le mot qu'on va vivre ensemble ce matin. L'heure des adieux à la monarque. Alors on s'attend, vous voyez les images des cortèges qui s'approchent, les dignitaires qui ont commencé à faire leur entrée à l'abbaye de Westminster. On s'attend aux obsèques du siècle qui promettent d'être, mais vraiment grandioses, une des plus grandes cérémonies jamais organisées au Royaume-Uni. D'ailleurs, il faut le dire, les premières funérailles d'État depuis celle de Winston Churchill, ça nous ramène en 1965. Alors avec moi en studio, ma collègue Emmanuelle Latraverse ainsi que James Jackson, historien spécialiste de la monarchie. Bonjour à vous deux. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, bonjour. Alors, dernière étape, on peut le dire, hein, Emmanuel, d'abord de ces 4 jours de chapelle ardente là, au Westminster Hall, 24 heures sur 24. On a vu ces Britanniques, ces centaines de milliers de personnes qui sont allées offrir un dernier hommage à leur reine.
Oui, c'est tous les événements qu'on va vivre ensemble ce matin sont historiques, ont été minutieusement planifiés depuis des décennies. Je pense que ce qui aura marqué les esprits, c'est ce qu'on appelle en Angleterre « the queue », cette file qui est comme devenue une expression de recueillement, de deuil, de respect. Des gens sont venus des 4 coins du monde
de partout.
Pour venir rendre respect à cette reine qui, on se rend compte, a marqué les esprits, a marqué l'histoire et donc finalement le respect qu'elle inspire dépasse sa fonction.
Ouais. James, on voit donc les dignitaires qui entrent petit à petit dans l'abbaye de Westminster. La plupart arrivent en autocar, mais il y a eu des permissions spéciales. On a su que notamment le président américain Joe Biden arrive avec The Beast, hein, sa propre limousine. Et là, c'est vraiment, on imagine le casse-tête au niveau du protocole, d'asseoir ces centaines de dignitaires de têtes couronnées. Il y a des conflits entre certains. On parle de têtes couronnées, là, notamment un petit exemple, les 2 rois d'Espagne qui sont là, Juan Carlos et son fils. Il y a des tensions à respecter. Tout un casse-tête là, pour ce qui est de placer tout ce beau monde à l'abbaye de Westminster ce matin. On voit Justin Trudeau, justement, un petit peu plus tôt, qui est arrivé avec son épouse Sophie Grégoire à l'intérieur de l'abbaye.
Oui, parce qu'on sait que pour certains invités, certains présidents,
qui utilisent la cérémonie à la propre fin. Par exemple, on a vu hier le président Bolsonaro qui, du haut du balcon de l'ambassade, il a parlé 13 secondes de la reine et plus de 2 ou 3 minutes.
Good morning. Thanks very much for joining us for CHEK's live coverage of the commemoration of Queen Elizabeth II, Canada's longest-serving monarch, the UK's longest-serving monarch. This is a live look now at Christ Church Cathedral in downtown Victoria. In about 5 minutes' time, a service will begin honouring the life and reign of the Queen. You can see people entering the church, preparing for the service to begin. Of course, dignitaries among those people, and many of those on hand at Christ Church Cathedral began their homage to the Queen earlier this morning, about 45 minutes ago at the BC Legislature. The 5th Field Battery Royal Regiment of Canadian Artillery offered a 21-gun salute before a procession began its sombre march from the BC Legislature through the streets of Victoria to Christ Church Cathedral. The Naden Band of the Royal Canadian Navy leading the way, along with a 100-person Royal Guard of Honour, members of Maritime Forces Pacific. BC's Lieutenant Governor Janet Austin, Premier John Horgan, other dignitaries taking part as well. The procession making its way from the Legislature past the Cenotaph, heading north along Government Street, turning east on Fort Street, making its way south on Quadra to Christ Church Cathedral. You can see thousands of people lining the route of the procession. The cortege arriving at its destination, Christ Church Cathedral on Quadra Street in the city named after Queen Elizabeth's great-great-grandmother, Victoria. Our April Lawrence is live at the cathedral. April, tell us about the atmosphere there and the emotion you're experiencing along with other folks there.
Stacey, it's certainly a somber mood even outside here of the church.
Good morning. It is an early start on Morning Live for a historic day, by the way. Thanks, Kelly Botello, for filling in for Annette Hom this morning.
My pleasure.
The Queen's funeral will be taking place in London at Westminster Abbey, and we will broadcast the entire service as soon as it happens. And throughout the morning, we're joined by Robert Oldham from the Monarchers League of Canada and Ron Foxcroft, entrepreneur and inventor who has many ties with the Queen and many great stories on his audience with the Queen. And we will watch together as the Queen makes her journey to her final resting place. Again, thanks for joining us on this Monday morning.
Yeah, that should be underway in about 15 minutes. But before then, we're going to say hello to Brian for a check on traffic and weather. Hey, Brian.
You, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. We're joined now by Robert Oldham from the Canadian Monarchists League. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's an honor to be here. Thank
you. We're so glad you're here.
On such an important day.
Yeah, it is historic.
Can you talk about what we're going to see within the next hour or so happening for the Queen's funeral?
Well, it looked like they were gathering at the Westminster Cathedral, and the dignitaries, the prime ministers and so on, are sitting right at the very front. And interestingly, when my daughter was working at Buckingham Palace, she did for a few years there, and we went one morning to Westminster Cathedral, and we just sat there with a very small little congregation in that little tucked away little area where the dignitaries are. So